G'day, it's Carl Thompson here from Storagecraft in the APAC region. Just giving it another minute or so for attendees to jump on in here. And I'll just do a quick audio check to make sure that everyone can hear and see my screen, and that looks like it's working as expected. That's awesome. Okay, well, just in the interest of time, I won't keep everyone waiting. I have got a couple of handouts attached to this webinar if anyone would like to download the product sheets, etc. And I'll obviously be covering off most of that information throughout the webinar. It is recorded, so that will be available to everyone afterwards in an email, and I can make the slides available if people would like to see them as well. What I'll generally do is go through my slides. If we've got time, I'll take you through a demo, ideally, and then we can finish up with some Q&A. So if you've got any questions along the way, don't hesitate to type them in, but I probably won't come to them until we get to the end, just to make sure I can get through everything and cover off most of the information that people are looking forward to hearing. All right, well, I think we've got the majority of people I was expecting on here, which is looking good, and it is recorded, so if anyone comes in later on, they'll be able to backtrack on that as well. Okay, so firstly, I just want to take it at a high level around our next generation product offerings. Obviously, today's webinar is going to be focused on our scale-out storage OneXafe hardware. Just to sort of join the dots with some of our newer technologies. You know, traditionally we've got our well-renowned Shadow Protect backup software, and what we've found is that Shadow Protect isn't enabling us as in Storagecraft and our partners to scale out into these larger enterprise and mid-market customers, and that's really where OneXafe is positioned around the scaling out to handle larger environments. And so what we've done is we've developed ShadowSafe as a next generation backup and disaster recovery technology, and that is the way it's architected, designed to scale out into hundreds and thousands of endpoints, and that gives us benefits with how that integrates into OneXafe. So I'll be touching a little bit on that today, and then obviously with our DR as a service, ShadowSafe links in and ties into our cloud services as well. So really what this comes down to is that we've got our software, ShadowSafe, the data protection software, and then we've got OneXafe, our scale-out storage. So ShadowSafe can work with any storage, any NAS, SMB, NFS, iSCSI type storage. Doesn't have to be used with a OneXafe. And likewise with the OneXafe, you can use any backup software as a target. This can be a target for any backup software. It can be used as a file server. And I'll talk more about the different use cases. So these two can be totally separate. And then obviously with converged, it includes the data protection of ShadowSafe with the hardware in a single SKU effectively. So there are some architectural benefits around going down a converged path, which I'll highlight today, but this is just to be really clear, is ShadowSafe can be used with any storage, OneXafe can be used with any backup product or other use cases, and Converge is really offering it combined. So you've got options. So really what we're trying to do is reimagine storage. We're trying to address the problems that are there in the market today, the problems that we hear from our partners around dealing with data growth and the traditional forklift upgrades that are becoming very costly and not really an option to move forward. And so what OneXafe is a solution that delivers scale out object-based storage on a NAS appliance that can be set up in minutes. So a couple of keywords there, scale out, we're going to be talking a lot about today, as well as what object-based storage means and differentiating that from traditional RAID. Some of the benefits that we inherently get with object-based storage is de-dupe, compression, encryption, replication, and some of the advantages in how this works and scales out for these larger environments. And what we can deliver is a really cost-effective solution that you can even bring your own disks. You don't have to buy the disks from us. You can mix and match disks off the shelf, whatever the market rate is for whatever size disk you want to put in. Really gets that cost down, and you just start with what you need and you can add to it as you grow. And this scale out gives you protection from unstructured data storage and the blowout costs associated with it. And I don't want to go into the data growth. I mean, everyone's heard this thousands of times, but what I do want to do is point out what specifically we're looking at. Your infrastructure, your virtual machines, your databases, your applications is structured data. We're not seeing from our partners huge growth in this space, but it's the unstructured data, all of your file shares, all of your backup data. videos, images, design, medical, you know, the IoT, that kind of stuff that's what's driving the growth. And so if you look at this, you know, in the green, you've got this expensive SAN to deliver your performance, but you actually don't need the unstructured data sitting on that. So we want to break that out and offer the benefits and scale out storage where it's required. And that's really what we're focusing on today in the blue. And so, you know, if you look at the traditional answer, it's buy it all now. Buy a chassis that can scale up. You know, what do we need last year? What do we need this year? What happens when we grow? What do we need, you know, looking forward? And this is the problem, it's unknown. People don't know the data growth. They keep saying it's going to double, it's going to quadruple. We don't know, and everyone's affected differently. And this is the challenge, is how do you, you know, design or architect a solution that's going to be good in 3 or 5 years' time? You just don't know what the growth or the solution is. And, you know, you don't want to risk filling up a chassis and then having to rip and replace with a whole new product. And so, you know, the biggest thing is it comes down to a cost thing, right? Is if you make the mistake, you over provision, you under provision, it all is going to equate to cost to fix it. And so scale out object base is really eliminating the guesswork. It you know, gives you the flexibility to scale out with what your needs are, scale out performance, capacity, and availability. And you can provision exactly what you need and keep adding to it. So you're just scaling out horizontally. So what we're looking at is, you know, what are the challenges in scale-up storage? I've talked about, you know, NAS sprawl, you know, or rip and replace type scenarios when you fill it up and you need another one, limited throughput and complex configurations, complicated storage management, escalating storage expenses. So I'm going to talk a lot about you know, how we differentiate through this webinar. But the other thing is when you look at scale out storage, there's a lot of really good vendors that do scale out storage, but they can be very expensive, they can be complex to manage, and a lot of scale out and object type storage only works through APIs. You've got to build your application and environments to work on that specific storage, and that gets, you know, costly and then complex in itself. So what we're trying to deliver is an easy to use, powerful, simple, protected product that has some of these best-in-class features that deliver the enterprise type features that you know and love, but really simplify that. And when you look at the sort of conundrum of where we fit in, you've got your general purpose file servers, your NASs, your Windows file servers, but you don't necessarily have a lot of the high-end features of the tier ones. And what we're trying to do is really bridge that gap and allow you to scale, to start with what you need and then grow into or scale out with, you know, your capacity requirements. And, you know, when you look at RAID, one of the interesting things is if you take a guess around when RAID technology was born, the hint is looking at when Star Wars came out, 1977. So redundant array of independent disks. I mean, what's the big deal? Everyone uses this, they rely on it. But it's understanding what the challenges are. And, you know, traditional storage is based on RAID. It usually requires all disks to be the same type, the same size. Using LUNs is less configurable. It's time consuming to expand. It's troublesome to manage. And then you run the risks of long rebuild times, particularly when you start talking about 6, 8, 10, 12 terabyte disks, is the time to rebuild them is significant, and then the other associated risks that go with it. So you see traditional SAN, iSCSI fiber channel protocols, there's been a bit more of a trend to file protocols, again, all you know, sitting on underlying RAID technology. And some of the limitations is that you're stuck with these guesstimate decisions on what kind of capacity do we need to start with. You can be limited by controllers, fixed performance, capacity and availability. And, you know, you're going to really have to over provision and then run the risk of under provisioning as you go through it. And those are the, you know, some of the inherent limitations. But really what we're seeing is it's just dead. You know, RAID is dead. Traditional file servers are dead. And we did a webinar on our file servers dead and talk about what are the challenges in your traditional file server. But what you don't want is data loss, right? You don't want data corruption. You don't want correlated drive failures. You know, a big drive fails, the rebuild time on the other ones and the load RAID has to go through to read every sector on all disks. And that causes slower performance, increases the risk, greater wear on disks. You know, the management I've touched on before, and, you know, then being locked into having to buy the same types of disks, the cost keeps going up over time. And so again, you know, you've got these top tier vendors, and as it shifted from block protocols to file protocols, you know, we're seeing there's still a lot of underlying storage that relies on this. We are seeing a much more of a shift, particularly in the enterprise, to modern object protocols. Again, the problem being that it relies on APIs. So again, these logos here, all massive enterprise, you're thinking, well, why do I need that? So what we're trying to do is, how can we deliver that to you affordably, but give you ease of use that you're not tied into these APIs? And that's exactly what OneXafe is. We manage the object store and we present that as filers to you. So very easy to consume storage, and all of the guesswork and the complex configuration is all automated for you. So really, it's a game changer. You're getting the benefits of object storage: better performance, easier expansion of capacity, complete flexibility to scale out exactly with the business as their requirements grow. And again, you're not over provisioning, and you can continue to provision throughout the life cycle. So the big thing is that you're getting all the advantages of traditional NAS, but superior properties of object storage. It is still a NAS, it's an appliance NAS. We'll talk a bit about what that comes to, but you're getting a horizontal scaling, you're getting multiple copy protection, the enterprise storage features. And not only is it excellent scalability, you're getting simple management, which we'll talk about, our cloud-based management, and you're getting features, rich features such as inline, variable length or fixed length dedupe, encryption at rest, replication is post-compression dedupe. So a lot of features and functionality and capability built into how this works. And really, why you should care is that this hyperscale growth is becoming really hard. There's a lot of challenges around the growth. One of the big challenges is we're hearing more and more about is that how do we protect this data, and that's going to be an interesting discussion that we'll have. But with now, it's not just an enterprise problem. We're seeing medium-sized and SMBs are starting to run into these challenges. And is cloud the right place to be putting this data and looking at the total cost of ownership? So let's look at how do these objects work, right? You've got a file and it comes into a ring. Now a ring is, in object storage terms, is the same name as a cluster, right? So you've got a cluster, it could just be a single node. A file comes in, it gets divided into objects, it gets compressed, and it gets deduped. Now all of this is in line. So as the file's been received by the node, this all happens automatically in line, and then the data gets distributed 3 times. So by default, 3 times. You do have an option to set it to just 2 times. But this is obviously protecting us. If 2 disks were to fail, we've still got a copy of the data. There's no degradation. All of the data is still there. So everything gets distributed automatically across all of the available disks in the ring. We're going to talk more about the metadata and the timestamp and the hashes, etc., coming soon, but that's all baked into how this architecture works. So let's look at what happens when a drive fails. Right, so a disk dies. Now the first thing is there's still 2 copies somewhere else. So there's no degradation, the storage is still running as expected, there's no problem. But what it will do is it will say, hey, look, I need to repair myself. So it will automatically rebalance by shuffling the data around to make sure it's got 3 copies again. So it doesn't have to read every sector on every disk to do this like RAID does. It can rebalance in a 20th of the time, and I haven't even needed to replace the disk. So if we do replace the disk or add a new disk, the OneXafe will see it as more storage. So it goes, cool, I can reclaim some more space here, and it will just start rebalancing to make sure that there's 3 copies evenly spread across all of the disks. So again, it happens automatically. There's nothing you need to do. Likewise, if you need to add more nodes, you plug them in, you can tick a box which says if another node gets connected to the same network, it will automatically join the ring. There's 0 configuration required. You just plug it in and add in your disks, and it will automatically add it to the cluster and just continue to rebalance. So you can add nodes, you can add disks as you need more capacity. At the moment, we support up to 7 nodes in a cluster, which gives you on-the-fly expansion. So again, really, really simplistic and really cool. So when we look at, what is the real difference, right? So RAID volumes are allocated to applications, whereas object storage, it's a global file system available to all applications. With RAID, data is tied to a physical location on spindles, whereas object storage, data can be transparently moved to any spindle. With RAID, increasing storage capacity in step functions. Typically, you're going 6 to 12 drives, identical capacity, whereas with object storage, it can go in granularity. Any number of drives, you can mix and match different size drives. You can even use SAS or SATA disk. Honestly, it doesn't matter. You know, with RAID, you've got rigid replication configuration requirements. With object storage, it's flexible configuration. We can replicate different shares, you know, in different configurations. So it's a lot more flexible from that perspective. And it's not prone to data loss from correlated failures and or bit rot. So you're getting guaranteed data integrity with object storage. And so, you know, when we start looking at, look, what is inside this cluster or this ring, and really it's the file system presented as a service, content addressable objects created from the file system, all files are decomposed, inline, de-duplicated, and compressed. And these objects are persistent and immutable to the distributed object storage. And this word immutable is really key, and I'll be talking a bit about the immutable objects shortly. But as you can see here on the right, what we've got is these microservices. So you've got the file systems. This is presenting the SMB and NFS protocols. When you're looking at our Converge, we also have a data protection services container. And the benefit with Converge is the data protection services writes directly to the distributed object store. So when you're using it's effectively the shadow-safe technology for backing up your VMs, it is writing directly to the object store. Obviously, that's going to have performance benefits associated with it compared to going through traditional NFS SMB filers. But this is a very powerful solution that's all delivered you know, through a web interface that you can configure a share and automatically flow through this. And this is, again, just sort of showing the microservices that are running SMB and NFS, and with Converge, the data protection services, which sits there to stream the shadow-safe data protection backups directly to the object store. So what we're doing is enabling a lot of these features, right? So scale-out storage, RAID-less data protection with no LUNs. You've got inline dedupe. Again, the shares can be defined as fixed length or variable length dedupe, which has benefits depending on the type of data. And you get your compression. Continuous data protection, which I'm going to talk about next. Encryption at rest can be turned on or off for the cluster if you want that. And comprehensive disaster recovery, including multi-site remote replication. So there's, when I talk about continuous data protection, that's the OneXafe protecting its own data. Then obviously you've got your data protection if you're using, you know, the backup technology across your virtual and physical infrastructure. And then with each node, you're getting your fault domain protection. So you choose 1 or 2 drive failure that determines the number of replica of the objects across the cluster. Then you can protect against 1 or 2 entire node failure. So if you've got 2 nodes in a cluster, you can actually lose 1. And your data's still protected. If you've got 3 nodes or more, you can lose 2 of those nodes in a cluster without losing that data. So very powerful. Again, dynamic recovery from drive failures I talked about, protection against Uber and bit rot type scenarios, and really the capacity and resiliency of scale-out clustering with zero conflict dynamic object placement. So when we talk about data loss, it's important to understand, you know, what we're actually trying to address, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on this. Now, these couple of slides, I've got some stats. I don't know where they came from, so don't quote me on them. It was a marketing thing that came through, but it's more, I think, you'll realize, you know, the numbers in here around, you know, where people are running into. So most companies, 86% of customers have experienced data loss. So, you know, everyone to some degree is bound to have come across a scenario where they've had data loss. You know, when we drill into it a bit more, what are the causes? Most likely human error, right? People making mistakes, deleting something, overriding something, moving something. 19% security hacks, obviously we know ransomware and things like that have been on the rise. Other will be things like hardware failure and then natural disaster. So, you know, the common thing is human error. What that translates to is we need to be backing up this stuff frequently. You know, once a day isn't enough. And then that obviously correlates to recovery. How can we recover quickly within the hour? You know, how can we do this? And this is the concern that we're seeing from hunters. Only 15% can recover from severe data loss. And one of the challenges, right, is if you've got terabytes of data, how do we recover that quickly? So with OneXafe CDP, it's continuous data protection. This happens automatically every 90 seconds. So the way the data comes into Object Store is it doesn't have to make a copy of it. It gets written in as immutable. So every 90 seconds, the objects come into the next snapshot. So this is, a very powerful way to instantly protect, hundreds of terabytes of data. It can snapshot every 90 seconds. Those snapshots are immutable. So ransomware can't corrupt these snapshots. They can't be overwritten or written to. They're totally immutable. And therefore the recovery can be as close to the infection as possible. So extremely powerful. So what we're seeing is people liking this just for their backups. Their backup software, whether it be StorageCraft or another product, will have its own retention. So you might have the OneXafe snapshotting just down to 2 weeks, for example. But that's protecting all of my backup data from being hijacked or corrupted or so forth. But then you might be using OneXafe for a file server, and this replaces the need for backup software because the OneXafe is going to do the snapshots of that data for me. So obviously if a ransomware attack or human error was to happen or corrupt files or something gets deleted, snapshots are totally unaffected. So a user can go back and the user themselves can right click if they're using Windows and go previous versions and just grab it back themselves. If they're on a Mac or on a PC as well, they can effectively browse to a share. If these are some files that got infected, they can browse to the root of the share. They'll see a snapshot folder, which obviously if you're using ABE, you can access-based enumeration, you can obviously hide the share, but they'll basically, inside the snapshot folder, there'll be a folder for each snapshot represented by the date and time, and within there will be a complete representation of the file system. So very easy to browse through it. We also have the ability to clone a share. So if you've got 100 terabyte share, we can instantly clone a copy of that share to a new share name. It happens instantly. There's no time. It doesn't have to copy everything. It can address it back to the objects. And you could make changes or do testing with that or whatever have you. But you can also instantly promote any of these snapshots to a new share. So if we got a share, 20 terabytes that gets corrupted, we can go back through here and go, oh, cool, that's where the problem happened. We can go to the snapshot right prior and promote that to a new share. We can then go and delete the old share or rename it, but we can instantly roll the share back and get up and running, which is extremely powerful. And this is how we deal with, large data volumes, is, the backup, but also the recovery is extremely fast. I did an article back in Feb, actually, and I just wanted to bring it up very quickly because it raises an interesting point, and I think it addresses some of the problems. Actually, where have I clicked on the wrong link here? Here we go. So what I was talking about is that there was back in February, there was a backup product announced a new feature to back up NAS shares. And I thought, you know what, this is kind of cool. It is a challenge. How do people back up NASs, right? What software do we have to go on and back up a NAS? And the example they used was 13 terabytes. It was a copy of Wikipedia, I think they downloaded, but it took 30 hours for the initial backup, and then it took 22 minutes for an incremental, and that incremental was with near no data change. So, what interests me is, well, how does that scale? What if you've suddenly got, 20 terabytes or 100 terabytes, and 100 terabytes, according to that calculation, would take 10 days for the full backup, and then 3 hours for an incremental. So what quickly becomes apparent is this isn't something you can do every, the first backup is going to take days, but you can't, these incrementals you'd probably only run once that night time. So therefore you've got a backup window. You also need a place to store these backups because it's obviously going to go somewhere else. And so, these are the challenges that, this is like throwing a Band-Aid approach to fixing something, and it's not even giving you a very good outcome. And then obviously the recovery time to restore that data would take similar time, right? So this is, really the interesting thing is OneXafe CDP is enabling us to protect that data, and then obviously with replication, we replicate to another cluster offsite that's going to replicate the snapshots with it as well. And that's really giving us the best of both worlds. When we look at the models, there's 3 models. These are all OEM Dell hardware, by the way, and I point that out because we can offer, for our on-site support, premium support if people want with these nodes. The 4412 has 12 disks, 4417 is 17 disks, and the 5410 is an all-flash 1U 10 SSD model. But basically, when you look at the 4400 series, these two, the 4412 and 4417, 2U form factor, they can take 3.5-inch disks. They can be SAS or SATA. Drive capacity from 1 terabyte up to 12 terabyte. The maximum capacity in a 4412 is 144 terabytes raw. Obviously, with 144 terabytes, you would generally have 3 copies, so you divide it by 3 would give you 48 terabytes of accessible capacity, but then you're going to get your dedupe and compression across that. You know, if you had 7 of these clustered together, 336 terabytes accessible, again, your dedupe compression, you're going to get significant mileage out of that. 4417, 204 raw terabytes, divide by 3, 68 accessible terabytes in a single node. Again, dedupe and compression, particularly for backup data, you're going to get significant mileage out of that. So these, again, we can bundle them with disk, or you can plug your own in. When you order, you'll choose if you want them to be 10 gig base T or SFP plus. They've all got dual swap power supplies, default next business day on-site replacement, or you can upgrade for 4-hour premium support. 4412, again, as I mentioned, it's got 12 hot plug drive bays. It comes with the bays, so you can plug your own disk straight in. The 4417 has another 2 disks on the back and 3 in the middle, which I'll show you next. But down the bottom, these are all PowerEdge servers. So you've got your iDRAC port for lights out management. You've then got an onboard. So this is the quad bay here, 4 ports of either base T or SFP plus. So you need to choose that when you're ordering. Generally, you'll have 2 connected to the data network on LACP bonded, and then another 2 for the intercluster network when you've got multiple nodes. So they'll go into, you know, ideally a separate switching or separate VLAN, and that's for talking to the other nodes in the cluster. This additional add-on card's not included by default. You will see that in any of the demo units. Generally, we bundle them with SF plus and base T options, but we may have 25G expansion slots for that in the future as we see demand for it. And then, of course, you've got your 2 hot swap power supplies there. The 4417, as I mentioned, has got the 3 disks extra in the middle and then 2 at the back for the additional capacity. And the 5400, again, got the 4 NICs, won't have the extra little riser one. It won't include that one by default. The 4 NICs, you'll choose SFP plus or base T. Again, you know, bring your own SSD. So really getting the price down on these models when you're talking about disk. Generally, what we see is all flashes for primary storage. So these are VMware ready. The most dominant use case of 5410 is for running virtual machines on this storage. So it's an NFS data store that plugs into VMware and fully certified to run VMs on this. At the moment, we're hitting just shy of 30,000 IOPS. The target for us is to get that up to 50,000. And, you know, when you look at Pure Storage, you know, the industry leader for 1 million IOPS, their average customer is 50,000. So we'll get there with the flash storage. We do have some customers that use it as a backup target where they just want the fastest backfill capability, and you know, they're running all flash and the rest of their infrastructure, and that's what they want. But generally, they're going to get, you know, particularly with our shadow safe technology, you know, the instant boot and stuff, it's going to perform extremely well, even on the spinning disk. So with the 4412, 4417, you know, backup storage, file servers, you know, the unstructured data use case, replication to other OneSafes, with the data protection, you know, you've got Azure, AWS, StorageCraft, DR as a service offerings. So with the multi-site replication, it's effectively 2 or more rings connected for the purpose of replicating data. So it's an asynchronous replication between multiple sites, one-to-one, one-to-many. You can go from the flash cluster to a hard drive cluster. For example, if you want to keep the cost down in the offsite, and the replication is done at the share level. So you can have a share that goes from Auckland to Perth and Auckland to Singapore, for example, then other shares that go, you know, each one can be configured separately. And then the benefit with the replication is it's all post-dedupe, post-compression, so very efficient. It's all compressed, and it gives you a very fast replication solution, which you can instantly promote. So the second share with asynchronous will obviously be read-only. You can promote that to instantly go live with that at a DR site. So with each cluster or ring, you need with each node, effectively you start with a minimum of 3 drives. We recommend aiming for 6 to get some initial performance, and then add as you need. Additional OneSafe devices can be added as needed, up to 6 nodes per cluster. And as I mentioned, the fault tolerance is 2 drives per OneSafe can die with the 3 copies. And if you've got a ring of 3 or more nodes, you can lose, 2 entire OneSafe. So that's, really good fault tolerance. And all of this is managed through one system. We've got a few different flavors of one system, but traditionally you've got your cloud-based management, or you can do what's called a private version, which you've got it installed locally. So you can, there's no cost difference, but yeah, you can choose which way you want to manage this. And obviously with our cloud, you're getting 24/7 proactive monitoring, storage health and alerts, and remote replications all part of one system. And it's really just simplifying it, 0 configuration for adding storage or an additional node. Remote replication be accomplished within 3 clicks. So it's all multi-tenant. You can have different rings all into the same one system, so very easy to manage. Some of the use cases for the 4400, so the spinning disk series, as I mentioned, backup target, any backup software, unstructured data storage, so for file serving. So generally what we're seeing the biggest traction is that dual use case. If someone needs storage for their backups, they're putting one of these and they're going, you know what, we've also got a file server sitting on our SAN using up expensive storage. We're going to move that data off the SAN onto the OneSafe in a separate share. And then that frees up space on our expensive SAN to give us more life out of that. And then, the OneSafe is going to do all the dedupe, the compression of that. It all integrates into Active Directory, so all the shares, permissions, everything can remain the same. We're seeing some use case for, again, NFS, data store and VMware for archiving, but again, also consolidating NASs. We've got a lot of different NASs, unutilized space, etc. We can consolidate that into a OneSafe cluster. So really what we're getting is 0 configuration. You're plugging it in, setups are very quick, bring your own mix and match drives to drive that cost down significantly and scale out in 5 minutes. And one system's giving us that secure storage management and control, cloud-based or local, as I've talked about, with 95% of tasks, typical storage tasks requiring 0 configuration. So some of the key features: file and object storage platform, highly scalable, distributed file system with a single pool of storage, and a diverse use cases, primary, secondary, unstructured data. It's really just driving that price down because we don't need to over provision because of the bring your own drives. You're not locked into high drive costs or demand. And we're strong channel driven customer traction. So we're 100% channel through our partners. And it's really giving us this world-class solution that we're able to offer. And what we've talked about today: your inline, dedupe, scale out NAS, real-time replication, cloud-based management, encryption, and the continuous snapshots. And it's probably the continuous snapshots we see the biggest sort of uptake and interest in, because it's dealing with some of the real challenges around protecting large amounts of data and making it very quick and easy to recover from that. So look, that's sort of a huge amount of slides I've covered off in a very short amount of time. What's good is I've got plenty of time to run through a bit of a demo and answer any questions. So what I'd like to do here is just bring up, I've got a one system installed. So this is a private one system that's been deployed. What's really cool about this version that I'm running is we can also manage, if we're using the data protection or the shadow safe technology, can be managed in the same place. But in here, I've got 2 new clusters in the OneSafe section here. And you can add in a new node, as simple as clicking add, go through and select the T's and C's, and it will automatically discover OneSafe. So if you've got OneSafe set up and you're pointing them to this one system, then it will automatically discover them. It's a bit simpler if you're using the cloud version, because they by default point to our cloud, so it will pick them up straight away. Or we can specify, if it's a remote node, we can specify the IP address that it's connected at. So very easy to add them in. If we look at this 5210, these are actually older models, but it all looks the same from within here. We get information on the model, formatted drive capacity, software version. So there's a simple upgrade option that will be available here if there's any updates available. In the networking, We get information on the configuration of the network and if iDirect setup. Generally, as I mentioned before, you'll have, best practice, particularly for multiple node clusters, is you'll have port group 0 configured for your data network. So this is for your users to access the shares over port group 0. Generally, you want that bonded 10 GBE, 2 NICs on LACP. So you want a switch that can support LACP. But then, again, with multi-node cluster, you'll configure a second port group 1, and that will have another 2 NICs assigned, LACP bonded together, and that's for each node to talk to the other nodes in the cluster for the, for all the rebalance work and that kind of stuff. So isolating that out just offers improved performance of the architecture. Then the hardware tab, we get visibility. I've just got 3 disks connected in this particular unit. I don't really use it too much. It's just sitting in my Sydney lab. But this, will show me if there's any disk failed or what drive bays are free. It'll give me information on the hardware, what network's connected, and so forth. So that's a nice little view of the storage there. And obviously, if I had multiple nodes in this cluster, I would see them all listed here and I can navigate through them. So I'm getting a lot of information here around, de-dupe ratios, compression savings, the total amount of data written, and so forth. But in terms of, once you're up and running here, is really just going into shares and adding in a share. So I go create share, give it a name, and choose, a cluster that I want to use, SMB or NFS share to set up. And then I can choose the policy that it's for. So for virtual servers, for backup and recovery, default. And really you can, if you hover over that little eye, it'll tell me what the default, it's going to enable snapshot retention, compression, and de-duplication on variable length. In fact, these are all configured as variable length is generally the most beneficial. You can come in and turn off variable length dedupe, and it will do fixed length dedupe. So with object storage, you get inherently dedupe by default. And one of the cool things actually that I forgot to add is because it's part of object storage, there's no rehydration. There's no impact in a recovery or getting data out. It streams out at the same speed. It doesn't have to rehydrate and figure out what objects it needs to match up to get your data back. So dedupe is inherent. Variable length, fixed length have different benefits, but generally you're going to get the better savings for most use cases with variable length dedupe. And obviously compression. But this is showing me here if I want to customize my snapshot retention. So again, if the share I'm creating is for backup data, my backup software's probably already got a retention within it. And so I don't need to double down on that retention with the OneXafe, but I might want to put 2 weeks of snapshot retention, and that's going to protect me from anything that might corrupt or ransomware infect my backups. But likewise, if it's a file server, I might want to have, 1, 3, 5, 7, or forever retention, which keeps every snapshot forever. And the cool thing, as I mentioned, is the snapshots, it doesn't have to go and make a copy of the data. It just says, keep it in the object store, make it immutable, and it just keeps going. So it's only getting the incremental changes, and obviously everything is you're getting the benefit of the global dedupe. So, quite often it doesn't have a significant impact on the storage capacity. So yeah, you can create a share. You can select a share. We've got the Sydney share here. I can go up here and say I want to replicate that share. It'll then say, hey, cool, you've got another cluster that you can replicate to in your one system. Go next. If you need to configure, depending on your firewall configuration, you can set up any external IP address settings and go finish. And that's it. It'll then start replicating automatically at any stage. You can see that this has got the replication active and that this share is replicating from another cluster. So I can actually see it's up here. This is the live share. See, it says it's writable. This one down here is the replicated copy. It is read-only. So at any stage, I can come in here and promote this. I can promote the share to become the primary share. That will make it writable. It'll make the other one read-only. And then when I want to roll it back, it just sends the changes back the other way. Well, in fact, it'll automatically start doing that. So we can fail over and then fail back very efficiently in terms of bandwidth. It doesn't have to resend everything. So, this works fantastic. I mean, I've just had a customer going through a process of migrating their virtual infrastructure into a data center. They need some storage left on site for some media work. So they're going to put in a OneXafe, or they're going to put in a OneXafe there, then they'll replicate a copy of that to the OneXafe in the data center, a share-based replication. The file server will sit on another share in the data center, and that can replicate back to the on-site. And then I'll have another share for all of the backups in the data center to come to the storage. But getting, that dual use case of backup data, file serving, integrated in, which is really nice. Under the configuration here for the OneXafe clusters is where you can come in and join it to Active Directory. You can configure up to 25 virtual IPs, but obviously the virtual IP is the target IP for the cluster. So that can all be configured from here. And then you've got a bunch of, reporting around OneXafe capacity growth and trend, and OneXafe share usage. This particular version of OneSystem that I'm using doesn't have all of the reporting yet. So there's a number of other reports that are coming around performance, more reporting around the dedupe stuff and so forth. But depending on what you need, we'll sort of guide you through, what might be the best fit. If you want the cloud-hosted version, if you want the private version, what your needs are. If you're looking to use our data protection capabilities, based on ShadowSafe, what version of OneSystem will suit you best. But we are actively working to merge the different versions together in a, to have a completely feature-rich version based on this version of OneSystem you're seeing now. So, this is the converged OneSystem, and we've just sort of recently launched the cloud OneSystem.storagecraft.com for our OneXafe Solo product, and that very soon, at the end of next month, actually will also support our ShadowSafe, and then around the same time also have the OneXafe stuff based out of it as well. So look, I don't want to confuse you too much about that. There is a number of options. The best thing is to talk to your sales engineer around what you're wanting to do, and we can help you with the different options around that. But very easy. OneSystem can be deployed if you're looking to run it on-prem into a VM in Hyper-V or VMware in just a couple of minutes. You can go in and add your OneSafes and you're up and running. So look, I think again I've probably covered off a lot of my slides, but the solution itself is extremely simple, all web managed. So there's really just not a lot to it. We do have demo units floating around the APAC region. So if you're interested in trialing it or you want to know more, just don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time. Again, I do have some handouts. If you're on this webinar live, you'll see a couple of handouts available. Actually, I will like to, I think I've got an option here. Give me a second. I created a poll out of interest. I'm going to try and launch this now. I haven't done it before. Okay, so it's probably just popped up on your screen. I'm just interested to get feedback from everyone that's on the webinar today around what capacity requirements you might see for unstructured data. So again, this is your customers or your environment where you what kind of backup storage you have, requirements, as well as your file serving infrastructure. And you can select multiple options here. What we sort of tend to see is historically sort of 10 terabytes plus and growing is where you're going to get the benefits and the cost savings with this. But that terabyte number, and this is more around spinning disk too, is starting to come down, because even people with 5, 6, 8 terabytes are starting to see the problems of, how do we back this stuff up frequently? How do we recover it quickly? And this is becoming a very effective solution that also then eliminates and future-proofs your customer or your infrastructure for the next 5 years, because you're not having to worry about if you're going to go through a significant growth challenge. But that whole continuous data protection, snapshotting, and immutable snapshots to protect against ransomware is really a key sort of interest driver in this technology. All right, hey, look, I think most people have filled out the poll there, so thanks for that. I'll collate that. I'm not sure if it's giving me what the results are yet, but that'll be useful for us to see what we're sort of seeing with our partners. Okay, look, I'll take some Q&A now. I think there's a couple of questions come through. If you've if you need to get on with your day, then thanks again for coming along to this webinar. Again, it will be recorded and sent out to everyone. If you want the slides, we can attach that as well. But yeah, really appreciate your time coming along today. Okay. So someone's asked about the ransomware mitigation. So we talked a bit about the CDP today. Yeah, I'm not sure. Someone was asking, they couldn't see my screen, but I'm pretty sure my screen's been shared. Yeah, I can see that it's coming through. So it might have just been an issue for one particular person, but hopefully that came through. Someone's just asked what happens in the event of a one system failure. So that's a good question. So obviously, one system's used to manage the OneXafe storage. So if one system goes down for any reason, whether it's our public version or you've deployed your own private version, the one system keeps running normally. There's no problem with users accessing shares and continuing to do anything. Obviously, what you won't be able to do is go and create a new share or set up a new replication until you can access that one system again. So yeah, if you have internet outage, it's not like the OneXafe cluster is going to go offline. It will continue to work. And yeah, obviously our one system that we run is currently hosted in Amazon, so we've got all the resiliency and redundancy around that. If you're running your own private one, and if you've got the ability to do like a Hyper-V replica or high availability within VMware, that's going to give you some protection of that. But also, if it was to die and you don't have a backup of it or a copy that you can recover, you can just deploy another one system, rediscover the cluster, and it will populate all of the information across. So, things like the Active Directory configuration, all of your shares, the replication that's been configured, that'll all come back in automatically. So you're not really in a risk of any data loss or any interruption to the service. It's just solely from a management perspective. So you're totally protected, through that. Yeah, look, someone else, well, it's actually the same person saying he didn't see my screen through the entire presentation. Look, I'm sorry about that. I don't think it's the case for everyone, but again, I do have a recording, so we will make that available. And I can obviously share my slides as well, but yeah, apologize for that person who had that problem. Cool. Okay, I think, look, that's the end of the questions. Thanks again for everyone coming along today. Appreciate your time and some nice questions there. Hopefully I've answered most of those questions as I went along that you had as I went along the presentation. Thanks again. Again, I'm Carl Thompson. I'm based in New Zealand. I help with the wider Australia and Asia team, along with my colleagues Jack and Gerard, who are based in Australia. Thanks again. Bye-bye.